Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on tearing down the walls, the next stage of customer learning at Atlassian. So if you are wondering what's going on at Atlassian, one of behind the scenes of their education program, you have found the right spot. My name is Shannon Howard. I'm the Director of Customer and Content Marketing at Intellum, and I host these webinars every month. And it's just really my joy to connect with you all as the education community and just start conversations about what are we doing and what are we learning and how can we all grow together as education professionals. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, so if you've got to hop off, you run to the bathroom at some point, eat some lunch, all good. You can come back. We'll send you a copy of the recording. If you want to come back to it, share it with colleagues, all good. There's a questions box. So underneath this video, so you're kind of on a page, if you scroll under the video, you're going to see a couple things. One is a questions box. You can use that to ask questions as we're going. So Dave and Marshall are open to questions as we're having a conversation here. But we also just want to encourage you to say hi, hello, where are you calling in from? It's just really fun, when you're on this side of the screen to know who's on the other side. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, you're welcome to do that. You also find some attachments, so you can find links to other resources, upcoming events under the video. And then there's also a section where you can kind of rate the session and just share your thoughts. What did you like? What do you want to hear more of? And things like that. We read all of those comments. My final little note here is just going to be around screen resolution. So we were talking earlier, maybe there's some internet thing happening today. I blessedly have not experienced this. I feel like every webinar day, there's some kind of internet panic, and my modem got replaced yesterday. So we are good. Good, at least in Black Mountain, North Carolina. But if the quality of your video looks weird, just go ahead, the bottom of your screen, there's a little gear icon and you can override the resolution. So it's just kind of like picking up on your internet bandwidth, trying to auto resize for you, but you can override that. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our friends from Atlassian here. So we've got Dave, maybe wave, that rhymes.
Hello, hey, how you doing, everybody?
And then Marshall, and I'll give them both a moment to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into what you're doing at Atlassian.
Cool. Marshall, why don't you take the lead here? I'll follow in.
Great. Hey, everybody. My name is Marshall Lee. I'm the Director of Customer Education at Atlassian. I've been with Atlassian for about 5 years. I've been with the customer education team that entire time, had a couple of different roles during that period. And Shannon wisely suggested that I crib from an earlier introduction that I shared in a Slack channel. So I'll just say that when I'm thinking about my professional life, I like to say that I put the A list in generalist. I've had a lot of different mini careers inside of my career. I was previously a journalist, a professional researcher, a content designer, an illustrator, a copywriter, and a creative director at advertising agencies. I like to think that I bring the best parts of all those previous experiences to the world of customer education. Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I love how you enter that, and actually, it's a really good frame up, because that with the A list and journalist, that's so cool. Some of you may know me, and Shannon, you and I have worked together a lot. We actually got to meet in person a couple times recently, which was cool. I am the Senior Manager of Learning Solutions and Programs, reporting to Marshall, so we work together all the time on doing amazing stuff. If you don't know about me, you can check me out online, definitely at C-Lab. I've been a co-host for that for years, journaling and documenting along with Adam Evramescu the experiences we've had in customer education and the things we've learned over time. Within that, I've had an intentional journey where I worked at Gainsight to help set them up for customer education, a company called Outreach, which did the same thing. Worked for one of our partners that works with Atlassian called Service Rocket, which provided a lot of interesting background. And yeah, I'm just an overall geek on customer ed, and I'm really happy to be here at Atlassian and learning some. We're at a really cool time when we're excited to talk about this with you today.
Well, I'm glad you all, good point, because when I think people who are doing really cool things, I think Atlassian is doing really cool things, not just with education, but also community and education. So excited to get the behind the scenes today. And now I'm going to mute myself and enjoy the show.
Right. I'm going to pick up the control here, if you're cool with that. And Well, we're going to have a good discussion today. Let me take just a moment here to frame us up. You'll probably get that familiar vibe from C-Lab. Where we go, let's do the frame up. What are we going to talk about today? And again, thanks, Shannon and Intellum, for inviting us into this. We really like this exploration and talking about the art of the possible and the things that we can do. Today, I really like the name of this. Marshall, we give you credit for this tearing down the walls motif. What we want to do is start there and start with that evocation of, it sounds bold, right? It is bold. Why are we tearing down the walls? We're going to get into that. What does that even mean? And well, obviously, bearing the lead here a little bit, we're talking about rebuilding our learning ecosystem and all of the things that are now at, maybe I'll I'll put this in my context here. What I'm really excited for Atlassian is, we got here. Where are we going next? How does community layer into all this? How do we think about social and scale learning? How do we work with partners and expand the things that we can do to train people when it's not us doing the training? And then the cool part is, what's next? Where are we really going? That is what's exciting to me. So let's get into it.
Dave,
And
maybe if I can add
go
just
ahead.
one more note of context there. I think
Absolutely.
the reason that the name we chose really resonated for me in particular is that I meet a lot of other customer education professionals who are in a position that that for me feels similar to the position I was in when I joined Atlassian, where we had some things that were working, some things that weren't, but we had a vision for the future that diverged pretty radically from the path we were on back in 2020. And so right now we're in this very exciting building mode, but in order to build, first we had to tear some things apart and then understand what we could reuse and what we would have to discard. So, I'm hoping that there will be some questions from the audience about that process of dismantling as well as the process of building, because they're equally important. And we learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way, sometimes through making painful mistakes.
Yeah. It's part of the journey here. So why don't we start here then? Let's talk about the history. Marshall, you've been here 5 years now. You have this, and what I want to lead into this before we start talking about it is when I was coming from the outside in, I started in January, so I'm relatively new to Atlassian now. But we in the customer education communities, coming from that lens, saw the change that was happening, and that really got on our radar. It was very exciting. So, what got us here won't get us there. Maybe you can kind of level set this background as you've talked to me about it too, and talk to the audience about where we were. What are the things? What are we up against? What does that even mean? A little bit more depth.
Yeah, so the customer education program at Atlassian got started in earnest around 2015. So it's been around for about a decade. And originally it was constituted as a P&L education services business with a pretty narrow focus on delivering live training through a network of redelivery partners. The business was focused on bookings and revenue dollars. And of course, we're enabling customer success, but at a fairly small scale back then, right? Because we were focused on
Yeah.
live training. When I joined in 2020, the only on-demand training that Atlassian offered was essentially video recordings of ILT presentations, and they were all behind a paywall. We were charging sometimes upwards of $400 for an on-demand course. And around the time I joined, we were in our sales and success organization, and we were looking across the aisle at our friends in marketing, particularly the community team. And we were starting to have conversations about what it would look like to merge these functions and to really democratize our customer education programs so that we could reach 10x, 100x as many Atlassian users. So a lot of the work we've done in this past half a decade has really been focused on, at the deepest level, shifting the business away from a traditional P&L focus on revenue towards a customer success, an adoption focused success metric. How are we feeding into MAU? How are we helping our customers get more value out of the product at scale? And that's meant rebuilding our business, reskilling our people, and making sure that we're meaningfully integrating with the teams that are now our partners inside of the broader community department.
That's that story is actually pretty amazing. Because when I think about it, maybe we should also just take a beat to talk about Atlassian in the context that I think is really important here is, and this is me talking kind of out loud about the transformation that I've seen externally, and now I'm a part of. That from the outside, I saw all these things start to happen, and I got that feel of, okay, I was at Service Rock at the time. These things are paid services. We don't have all the kind of stuff like I would have expected in other customer education programs. But now that's all. Look at the program, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've done. I'm not going to steal the thunder here. We've done really cool things to build our program, and now we're at that precipice of going further. But the backstory was we got here out of sheer success. Atlassian is used by so many people all across the world. I mean, what are the numbers like roughly of the user base that we have, Marshall? I mean, I've seen all kinds of things.
We're on track to achieve our big, ambitious company goal of having 100 million MAU sometime in the next
Yeah.
few years.
Yeah, I wanted you to say that again because I mean, I just can't grok that. And sometimes it's such a big number. But when you think about that reach to be learning forward and to be able to meet people where they are, no matter where they are, we're engaging with people who've used Atlassian for decade, plus. And that transformation, that motion of how do we relearn? Let's use that. I'm kind of threading some stuff here, and I love how you talked about the democratization, and now we know the scale, the scope. So I'm going to move us forward, and let's talk about rebuilding our ecosystem, and like what is. And I think I'd like you to talk about this and set this up for us. This transition of that customer experience. This is a good slide for you to give us a little bit more context on.
Yeah, so I'll start with some sort of higher level, probably a little more highfalutin descriptions of this, and then we can decide where we want to drill in. But
Yeah.
broadly, we've been on this journey where we've been moving away from a centralized one-size-fits-all classroom model where we have everything inside of a single walled LMS system. And we're asking customers to opt out of whatever they're doing to come learn with us inside of our environment. And instead, we're trying to rebuild this much more extensible and flexible set of technology on the one hand and programs on the other hand that will enable us to integrate learning into the flow of work for more customers, and also, in my opinion, critically, empower our users to have more control over the learning experience. So one of the most significant and frankly laborious things that we've done to achieve this is rebuild our entire on-demand content library of several hundred lessons in a modular fashion and stored inside of a headless content management system. That allows us to not only provide a much more accessible and relevant learning experience for customers who are consuming on-demand content on our platform. We're now allowing someone to dive right into the 10 minutes of content that they care the most about instead of fishing for that content inside of a 1 hour or an 8-hour course. But it also allows us to syndicate that content across a variety of platforms. And that's really unlocked a much greater ability for us to partner with our peers across the marketing organization and inside of digital success, allowing them to essentially self-serve our on-demand content inside of their campaigns and channels, but it's all coming from one integrated backend. So we can still control all of the data, we can still control all of the versioning.
That is super cool. And again, if I can channel the felt experience from being a former customer and a partner, I like we see this one size fits all. Oh, go here and learn is now we're actually blowing all of that up. I like to talk about when you're redoing a system of learning, going from how did we put this before? We're on a podcast at one point talking about this transition from learning as a destination, go to the academy, to learning as a distributed function of your business. So now, well, I show up, look, oh wow, there's a video here. There's context here. It's in app. It's, oh, there's a webinar I can sign up for. There's instructor-led training if I want to do. So now that you can see us reaching out into the world and being there for where the customer is, which is so exciting.
Yeah, and even though we've moved on from our university name,
Mm-hmm.
we're not giving up on the academy model of having a hub with a structured experience that provides value for customers. We just believe that the best marketing for a customer education program is to go provide value with customer education resources in the places where customers are already looking for help. So we go provide that value and then invite them, now that we've already demonstrated value, invite them to come to our structured experience.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and it's
I see
so
Shannon has her hand up, Dave.
yeah. Oh, Shannon, what are you gonna say?
Doing the raise hand. I'm curious why you kept that, right? So I think a lot of people probably resonate with the idea of meeting the learner where they're at and going out and getting like to them. But you said you're not abandoning that idea of the academy model. And I'm wondering, why is that important to you? Or what does that do for Atlassian that you couldn't do in all those other channels?
Yeah, two primary reasons. One more tactical and one more sort of long-term strategic. The more tactical reason is because we want to be able to collect data to provide a really rich experience for customers. And we also want to be able to provide relatively simple functionality, like you've started a course of learning, but you're interrupted. You need to be able to return to that course and pick it up right where you left off. Now, that doesn't have to happen inside of an LMS. I think there's a couple of different ways that that can be achieved, but a traditional academy style experience is, I think, the best fit for that. And so we're always trying to give our customers an experience that is the learning content plus something that is additionally valuable, and make that the reason why the LMS is still compelling, why that academy style experience is so compelling. The other more long-term strategic reason we're doing this is because of our integration with community. So we now describe learning as one of the pillars of the broader Atlassian community, which includes our online forums, our community-led events, and also our customer advocacy program, what we call Atlassian Champions. And we're not just stitching together the programs at a surface level, we're deeply integrating the technology. So now we have a single shared profile across all of those pillars of community. We have shared gamification. So one of the reasons why this academy experience is still so important to us as a business is because it gives us an opportunity to take customers who came to learn and to then point them to something like a group that they could join in the online forums or a related event that they could participate in.
Yeah. Um, let's move in. You mentioned something that is a good segue into our next discussion point, which is data, right? We talked about, as we're really focused on the experience and telling stories. This one I thought was exciting when I was looking at some of our live learning stuff, not necessarily the on-demand stuff. We've been working with our data science team a lot to tell the impact of okay, well, we got you here, right? You're telling the story where we're in the ecosystem. I think I like this idea of this education qualified lead, or thinking like marketing, which is, Marshall, one of the things I really appreciate from your background is that we're bringing people into a funnel of experience, experiential funnel. It's not we're trying to get you to sell something, we're trying to get you to engage with us to more deeply learn about the tools that you use every day. So in this case, we've been seeing, I don't need to talk through all the stats, I just wanted to pop real data up there. We're seeing all this kind of lift in what happens next, right? And you
Yeah.
do want to go to that academy, because that academy is that structured learning experience that I think we all crave. But sometimes it takes a little while to scratch the surface and get you motivated to go, yeah, I really want to learn that now. Now I'm in, and now I'm going to take advantage of this stuff. Did you want to talk about this a little bit more, about the impact
Yeah,
here? Or do you
and
want to start?
I mean, something that's worth mentioning off the bat, because I understand that this isn't the case for every team, and so I think it's helpful to be transparent about this. We're tremendously fortunate at Atlassian that the business has supported us with resources like dedicated data science, engineering, design, and product management. So in addition to our fairly large core customer education team, we have dotted line connections to several different horizontal teams that support the entire community. So we've been able to devote a lot of resources and time to running observational studies, to A/B testing and experimenting in order to tell more meaningful stories with our data. So Dave's showing here some statistics for live learning that show impact that we're having really across the entire customer and buyer journey. Now, as a customer education team, we are very squarely focused on supporting adoption. We want to get customers to value more quickly. We want their experience to be very sticky, and then we want those licenses to expand and to cross-sell into other products. So we really focus on ensuring that our customers are using our products and are getting the most value out of them. We've run a bunch of studies to show pretty definitively, with correlation, of course, not causation, that when customers engage with learning, especially very early in their tenure in our applications, that their level of engagement inside of the product is significantly increased, and that we see that that increase is sustained over a long period of time. And I think, after 2 years of telling these stories inside of Atlassian, we now have broad understanding and agreement that customer education is vital and supports health throughout the customer journey. So now entering this new phase, it's really about taking this data, making sure it's not only understood, but that then those teams that we've now convinced that customer education is so vital know how to utilize us, and enabling them with self-serve access to as much as possible, and in some critical cases, working with them in a more hands-on capacity to build customized programs for them and their customer segments. And sometimes that means us going back to our own programs that we own and retooling them a bit to fit some specific need.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't put the stat up there, Marshall, but when you were talking about what happens, what's that increased engagement level? 2.3 times more likely that a person is to be more engaged after working with consuming our content. It's
Yeah,
pretty,
putting a
pretty good
little more
number.
color on that, we see that across all of Atlassian's core products, when a customer engages in education, they're about 2.3 to 2.5 times more active in the product on a sustained basis than a customer who did not engage in learning.
Yeah, it's super cool. Um, that's really important. We've sold it internally to the business. Now we're doubling down. Um, well, let's get into this though. This is a slide that I think is really important, and I'm going to mention our friend in the community, Adam Efremescu, who asked me point blank as I was entering into Atlassian, "Hey, can you talk to Marshall about this slide?" And this is really important to me to set it up. Again, going back several years, and while you were actively working, I was at Service Rocket. uh, I know Adam came up to me like, "Did you just see what happened at Atlassian? They opened up the academy," and oh my gosh, that was so exciting. That day, that moment in time was really exciting. And I'd like you to talk about this from your end of, okay, what were the thoughts behind this? What I'll mention Maria Manning Chapman, who she's a TSIA. She would usually say, we're going to go the other way. We're going to go from free to fee, and in our maturity process, this is bold and very different. And I wanted to get you to talk about the whys and how it's working. Well, I know how it's working,
Yeah.
but a little bit more.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I guess I was a little bit naive when I joined, because I was quite surprised that we were charging money for our on-demand courses. I was surprised by the amount we were charging, and I was surprised that there was any pushback at all to making most of it free. Now, I understand that inside of Atlassian and inside of many similar businesses, there are just practical considerations. You're organized in a particular way inside of a particular organization. That means you have to report revenue and bookings. And so dismantling a P&L business is very tricky. But in partnership with data science and our financial analyst team, I ran some projections and found really compelling data that by giving even a relatively small portion of our on-demand content library away for free, we could have a much larger impact on the business's bottom line. That seems to me like common sense, but I have learned that it is not necessarily common sense for
No,
everybody.
no.
And so it took about 2 years to convince the business that this was appropriate, that there would be significantly positive ROI for customers and for Atlassian, and then to do all the work behind the scenes to dismantle the old program and to build the new one. The results have been really compelling. And I totally understand the point of view that perhaps Maria might have and others might have, that people are going to value something more if they pay for it, that there's, the perception that the offering is more premium if a customer needs to pay for it. What we've found, though, is that the largest barrier to entry was any amount of payment, period. We were charging initially $350 for on-demand courses when I first joined Atlassian.
Mhm.
And the previous leadership of the Atlassian customer education team wanted to increase the amount of engagement with our on-demand courses, but was unwilling to make it free. So we, at that time, dramatically slashed the price, reduced it by about 85% to $40 or so, and we didn't really see engagement go up at all. And when we did some qualitative research with our audience, what we learned is even if we were just charging $1, we were probably not going to see much of an increase in the demand for the content unless we totally remove that paywall.
Right.
So since we removed the paywall, we've seen engagement with on-demand content go up 300, 400%.
Yeah. Uh, I wanted to add in here a couple of different points that expanded upon this. I see questions coming in. We probably take a beat for a moment and get back to that. But there are two things in this, Marshall, that are really important to emphasize. One of them is, and I didn't write this into our show notes, but it's more about when you talk P&L, your education services, in my mind. You're a professional services type function that's there to generate revenue by the act of training itself, training in and of itself, not as a function complementary to marketing and customer success, which is where this is where I draw the line and say, when you're talking about fee, your education services, when you're talking about free, you're using a chess piece to help people unlock their skills and abilities while decreasing the friction. And that's more of a customer success motion. Now you go,
Yeah.
oh, there's some content about this. You know what? Go here and take this course. You get a badge. You can earn a certificate or a certification, and that unblocks. And this is a conversation I had with customers when I was at Service Rocket. I would say, oh well, for training, just go here to Atlassian and you can take it. And then somebody come back to me and say, well, I have to pay for that. I don't. Now you've got friction, and people are like, well, I'm not going to pay for that. And now you've removed that entire blocker. So that's such an interesting transformation in a platform that I think it doesn't get as much attention as it should. That's really important to me.
Yeah, and making all of our on-demand content free has actually given us a lot of flexibility and created a lot of opportunities with our more service-oriented offerings. We're right now in the process of totally reimagining how we service our largest customers, our enterprise customers with education services, and having hundreds of free modularized on-demand lessons has given us the opportunity to think about how we create a more holistic, curated experience for these customers, not just deliver live training, but enable them to have a customized self-serve experience that is complementary to what they're receiving in the worlds of ILT and perhaps certifications as well. So we just see this transition from fee to free as powering and unlocking a lot of growth across areas of the business that we weren't even initially considering.
Yeah, that's let's have the have the audience hang on to that notion, because this is where we're going to talk about future state and that whole learning is everywhere motif. That's something that hooked me when we were talking before I joined. That we're making learning forward. We're making it more easier to access anywhere and anytime, even to like internal people saying, go try this out or go do this. We can find and self-serve a lot more and more freely. So it's really cool. Let's go a little further. And then this is where let's talk about what this whole integrated process is. So now we're rebuilding, restructuring. And you said we're like deconstructing certain things and we're reconstructing and integrating with community. And we have all of these other things. It feels as from the inside here, this feels so fun and interesting. Like everybody cares about learning now, and we're actually having these tendrils reaching out to other parts of the organization, and we're all starting to work together. Can you talk
Yeah.
about more of that?
And Alex asked a great question about this. He was asking about how we look at the value of the learning that happens in the online forums,
Yeah.
and whether or not we participate in those forums. Since we joined with the community team approximately 2 years ago, we've become very active in the forums. We use it as a primary channel for promoting learning offerings, but one of the for me best parts of merging with community is that we've formed a lot of meaningful partnerships with our customer community members, not just the named champions, but the community writ large, by empowering them to take things that we've made and then combine them with ideas that they have to produce their own offerings for their community. So one specific example is we worked within the community-led events channel that we already had and identified a small handful of content creators who were also excellent facilitators. And we set up kind of a sub-channel inside of community events that we call community-led classes. And we arm those people with some rudimentary materials and then some consulting hours with our team. And we've seen this amazing flourishing of learning that is designed and delivered by the community for the community. Initially, it was just a handful of events each month, and now we're seeing sometimes 5 to 10 events a week with 2, 3, 400 attendees on average. So this is something that is both exciting and I think candidly a little bit frightening or reorienting for a customer education team, right? We're really seeing what happens when we empower our community members to co-create with us. And one of the interesting things we're seeing is that they sometimes move faster than we do. They can identify critical use cases for training that are still stuck in our backlog and bring them to market more quickly than we can. And so we're learning from them, and their actions are helping to inform our roadmap now. So that's just one very specific example. But at the layer of the actual digital experience, we're really trying to understand what's the ideal model for that journey or pipeline of a customer who learns about the community, learns about learning, engages with us, authenticates with us, gets access to the whole suite of community resources, and over a period of time returns not just as a learner, but as a person answering questions in the online forum, as someone potentially writing and distributing articles on the community, as somebody who's attending or maybe even hosting events. And we're refining, how many members of our community, what portion of the community we expect to see become these champions, which ones we expect to see creating content, and trying to make sure that we've got a model that's flexible to enough to accommodate tens of millions of users who have very different needs and preferences.
Yeah. It's really cool to see that at scale where in one of the other programs is we have success champions as well, who are people who are embedded in accounts, who are actually doing customer user groups. And all of this fabric of learning has now been, I think going back to the word you said, democratized, even to the customer level. When your customer is part of your own growth journey to help everybody learn together, seeing that happen at scale it's rare to see it like this. And that's why we really wanted to talk about this story in where we're going. Maybe we've already talked about community, so I'm just going to put this up here. We can kind of skip through this. Um, but what you're just to reemphasize what you're talking about, co-designing learning content with people that are not us, right? When I was at Service Rocket, we had a really great relationship in building certification material and helping do that, but we were still a partner. But now you're edging that out even further to this whole cloud of people that they
Yeah.
love Atlassian and their careers are being impacted by that in such a positive way.
Yeah, and it's a way of thinking. It's a paradigm that we're trying to apply to everything we do. So even in the world of ILT, we're in the middle of essentially unlocking and modularizing our ILT content as well. We used
Mhm.
to give our instructors a locked set of courseware and say, you're going to teach the course exactly the way we built it. And what we found over time is that the facilitators, the instructors who are actually, the boots on the ground, working closely with the customers and experiencing these pain points alongside them, they just have richer information than we do about what each specific cohort of learners needs from a live class. And so we've unlocked the material and empowered our facilitators to customize it, to pull some items from course A and some items from course B and combine them to turn off certain lessons. And just seen really positive feedback and results from doing that as well. So one of the things that we're trying to embed in the culture of our organization is a lot of humility. We know a lot of things about Atlassian products. We know a lot of things about our customers, but we don't know everything. So we're trying to build this incredibly stable and valuable core set of assets and experiences, and then provide our community members, including our instructors, with the tools to do what we sometimes call last mile customization, to ensure that when those resources that we've created are actually delivered or deployed, it's the best possible experience for those learners, which often means diverting a little bit from what we originally intended.
Yeah, that is. I can't tell you enough. Like being here and being a part of this experience, sharing the story with the rest of the world about what is possible, what we've been doing, what you've done so far before I joined. It's so cool to see, and that this resonates so much with customers are our best resources sometimes because they know things we don't. This was a lesson that we learned in, gosh, going way back to Gainsight. We had this challenge where we were trying to teach people certain things about the platform, but we didn't have the time to do it. And then when we engage with that broader audience, we're seeing so much more interesting learning come out of it. So it's wonderful that we've unlocked that. Speaking of unlocking, let's talk about something that's a little bit weirder that I think was experimental, but is giving us, it has such good traction, is and has changed some of our thinking about learning and how we can do it in that social milieu, right? And what I'm talking about here is two things. One is how are you how are we at Atlassian taking advantage of social media and using that for learning? Now, it sounds weird, right? What do you mean social media? And then what about, how are we engaging in a scaled motion? Meaning we've already unlocked all this other content. We've unlocked our academy. We have modularized content. I know Andrew and Sarah and our team have been really we're breaking down all of our ILTs into smaller pieces. We're pushing all this content so others can use it. Now we're going out to take advantage of something that B2B SaaS software doesn't really do well. It's here. I'll cue up the next slide. I've had this question come up to me when I started at Atlassian, and someone said, "Well, what is Atlassian?" And I go, "Oh my God, you don't." I mean, I'm thinking about, I've used Atlassian for the last almost 2 decades. Products, Jira, Confluence, and a lot of people don't know that. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about Atlassian Answered and how that got started and why, and like what it's really doing for us. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you for moving that forward. I was looking at my own version here. There. One more. There. Sorry about that. So can you tell me a little bit more about where we started with Atlassian Answer? I'm going to put Kevin's material up here.
Yeah, so and I imagine a lot of other customer education teams have done something similar, but over the years, we dabbled with distributing our content on social channels, primarily on YouTube, a little bit on LinkedIn, a little bit on other places. But what we were doing was just taking chunks of material from our courses and republishing them as is. And we saw relatively low engagement, but even lower click-throughs. So people were sometimes engaging with the material on YouTube, but then they weren't really interested in following up and enrolling in a course. So this program had been dormant for a little while, and we had a new team member whose face you're seeing, Kevin, here, join.
Hey, Kevin.
And Kevin is a YouTuber, from long before he was an Atlassian. He has a very, very popular Rubik's Cube solving YouTube channel. And he took a look at our content and said, well, the problem is that your content wasn't designed for YouTube. You'd be making totally different decisions if you had used that as your first principle. And so we basically gave Kevin carte blanche to approach this in a pretty non-traditional way. He did a pretty simple analysis of search data, and he came up with a list of about 15 or 20 topics that he wanted to explore. They were quite rudimentary, but we immediately realized, these would nest really nicely into existing on-demand materials that we have, and not only into our learning materials, but also into campaigns that other teams are running. And the only mandate that we gave Kevin was design these to be an excellent experience on YouTube that converts. And so by taking that social first approach, he created content that blew all of our previous attempts at social learning out of the water. And one of the great things about doing this in a smart way is that this content doesn't just spike and then drop off. It's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow without us needing to do much updating or maintaining of any kind.
Yeah. I wanted to put this slide up in particular. This comes from one of the reports that Kevin had generated based off of our engagement data. And like you said, it's kind of, it was an experiment that grew legs and really proved to me, and this is something where I'm going to connect the dots to other things that we've been talking about in the industry as thought leaders about what are we doing with social. And one of the things that I've been so excited about, and this proves, is taking some of the content we have and changing that motif. And this is why it was just such a great thing to see give Kevin that carte blanche to try and use that experience that he had over, gosh, it was like a decade of experience doing his content. What this chart is saying to us is very different. Normally what you'll see is a flat line where it'll go up and then it'll just be flat. It'll even out. Here you're seeing engagement over time that isn't stopping and in fact is increasing I'm not going to use math terms, but in a good way, right? And in the first week, I know we had this linked on LinkedIn, and it was 400,000 views on LinkedIn, right? So what does this kind of content do? Well, now we're seeing other parts of our teams, our product managers, our product marketing managers, our CS people going, can we do something with this content too? Because it's exciting and gets people engaged. And then they go deeper. And that is such an amazing thing. So now we're actually increasing our flow, but also doing that like kind of I was talking to Garrett on our content team who leads all of that today actually. He said, I love this because it's kind of that entree and it allows us to think more broadly about it. And this is kind of like that social learning itch. And then we go deep and then we can go and we can craft these experiences. So this is super important for learning.
And at the level of content strategy, I mean, as you can probably tell, this content lives right at the boundary between customer education and marketing materials. And that was
Right.
by design. We really saw this as a wedge that we could use to break into more marketing campaigns and marketing surface areas. But it was designed by the learning team to connect to courses and other online resources that are, built with learning science in mind. And critically, it's doing something quite simple that I think customer education teams, including ours, forget about, which is that we tend to dump people into on-demand learning experiences that assume they already know a little bit about our products. And what we found is that one of the most typical questions we get, even by people who are engaging with our on-demand courses about, say, Confluence, is like, well, wait, what is Confluence and what is it for? And so Kevin is
Right.
answering some of those questions and removing some of those very simple objections before people ever arrive at the academy style experience. And we're just finding that the folks who engage with this video content first and then enter into an on-demand learning experience are much more likely to complete it as well.
Yeah, that's and I wanna I'll move us forward, but I'll add one other thing to this. What was interesting is that Kevin actually did some focus group studies. He picked a cadre of students from Cal Berkeley that he'd gone to school there and said, "Hey, can you do an experiment or can we do an experiment?" These are like engineering, other people that were probably gonna use Atlassian anyway, right down the road, but they haven't gotten into that career. Within he did it before and after, and the difference of that. What do they think about the product? How do they understand it? What are they excited about it? Was the number I should have added in here? The numbers were really compelling, but there's also the psychographic component that that might be a cohort of people, learners that are young professionals moving into a career and they've never used Atlassian before. But we're also seeing this in different areas. Like imagine hey, I'm a business team and now I'm going to be using Atlassian. Normally, my company had been using that for developers. We're expanding to use all of this as a system of work that all these tools work together. This is cool. We went in and then they see that and they go, no, I have purpose. No, this makes sense for me too now. It's not a developer thing. So it's doing all of these things to bring an understanding of the fabric of what this platform can do as a whole. And where Atlassian is, it's a family, it's a suite of really powerful tools, and how they work together is important. But if you don't have that entree in the what's in it for me, you you'll lose people. That's really what I was trying to get to here. Um, I had one more slide, but, just to kind of cap off what we were talking here and get into our last subject, so we have time for questions. I always like that term, "If you're not scaling, you're failing." So, what we're saying here is that going back to before, we have this flow, this idea of flow of learning. I've been using this concept of learning, what do I call it? Like learning pressure, what is we're always here, but now we're getting out there and oh, you'll see us on YouTube. Oh, your customer success manager for your account linked in a video that Kevin made or a short course or an in-app thing or some other experience. So we're partnering with CS. We're co-facilitating learning activities and events. We're sharing ownership. All of this stuff is changing the way we can teach at scale and help people to understand things. Um, anything around that you'd want to add on to before we talk about partners?
And I just think it's really interesting, when I talk to other customer education professionals, I think one thing I commonly hear is, well, the total addressable market, the target audience for customer education is
Damn.
not every single user of the product. And I think that's literally and
Yep.
generally true. But my strong hypothesis, my hunch, is that the majority of users are inside of our total addressable market for learning. So for us, that's tens of millions of learners. And
Yeah.
so we're always returning to the question of why are these 30 million not learning with us yet? What are we not providing? What are they confused about? Where's the gap between their needs and our offerings? And so I think one aspect of scaling is that's critical is a willingness to be constantly adapting and evolving as you learn more about your audience and as your ecosystem continues to change. Um, Another key aspect of it, which is often the most difficult part, is just increasing the visibility and understanding of what you do with your other organizations inside of your business. Because I think for us,
Yeah.
we've experimented with running paid advertisements to try to drive enrollments into training. We've experimented with all sorts of social advertising and organic advertising. And what we've found time and time again is that the most powerful lever that we have to grow engagement is through the channels that our internal teams own. So at the end of the day, so much of our
Hmm.
success or failure when it comes to scaling and growing comes down to how well we're able to educate our internal teams on the value of our own offering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that enablement thread through anything, which the only other thing I'd add to that, Marshall, was that I've been in another number of different orgs, and what you've just said there, that being able to have that connection, that through line to help other people in our org understand what all assets are, and we work together, that's hard to do because internally people are churning out, internally team leaders are moving on. But if we always need to be there from a learning perspective to encourage people to say, okay, well, yeah, we have all this content, we know how to use this together. These problems are solved by us working together to put this out to the rest of the community or rest of our, excuse me, I'm
And
breathe.
I mean, I think kind of lifting back the curtain, something that's been a really important part of our transformation and our growth is challenging ourselves and our team members about what compromises we're willing to
Mhm.
make our offering more attractive to these other teams that we're dependent on to go to market. And, I think that a team might come to you and say, oh, this training is too long, or it's in the wrong format, or I really just want this all to be videos, or I really hate these videos. Could they be something else entirely? And it's easy to have a knee jerk reaction of, no, we thought a lot about this. We made a lot of decisions and we made it this way for a very specific reason. What I found is that that response doesn't open a lot of doors to collaborations and partnerships. So I've really pushed hard on the team to seek to be really curious about why other teams are asking for what they're asking for, try to understand how other teams are incentivized and goaled, and then to get very brutally honest with ourselves about how far we're willing to push the learning experience so that we still feel comfortable that we are going to effectively change the behavior of the people consuming this content, that we're not just marketing to them to build awareness about something, but that we're willing to do it in a way that makes sense to our peer teams who want to share this with customers.
Yeah, well put. All right, let's get to partners then, because that's the other edge of what we're talking about. We talked internal teams. This our Atlassian Training Partners program in particular is what's been transformative, and I've seen the work that our team has done to kind of do some of the things you're talking about. How can we make it better? How can we improve it? How are we using partners and other partner vendors to fill that other gap where how are we going to train tens of millions of people if we had to do ILT? Um, let's talk a little bit more about the effectiveness of how does it, well, I'll give you one other thing that I want to add into this. What I love about the Atlassian Training Partners program is that we've done something that I've struggled with in other customer education roles where you need to do ILT, but that's hard to scale because if you had, like I had at one point, I had a team of 6, 7 trainers. They were all based in Seattle, and we had a global topology of we customers all over the world. So our trainers were burned out, and I didn't really think that was the right way to go. So why don't we enlist partners to do this for us on our behalf? And we're doing that, and it's such an amazing an important function for us because we can effectively scale up our training, our live training too. So I want to hear your thoughts more about that, Marshall, and how that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very resistant to the idea of building an internal training center and having dedicated facilitators, although we have many experienced facilitators on our team doing other jobs, in part because I'm just sort of temperamentally very focused on growth. So I always ask, okay, if this works, then what? And
Right.
the unfortunate reality of hiring facilitators, instructors is if it works, then you got to hire another one and another one and another one. So we've really focused on taking this network of external training partners and trying to make that ecosystem as healthy as possible. I think we have a pretty strong belief that if we can grow the supply of really excellent trainers and of great content, that demand will increase to meet it. So we're actually in the process of rewriting this again, reimagining this program again by looking beyond our Atlassian solution partners to other large global training organizations that we can partner with, where we feel comfortable that we can deliver a very high quality experience, but we will be less responsible for marketing the content because these training organizations provide their own marketing channels and resources. And we're already starting to see that pay off. So again, just another example of looking critically at what we have and asking, okay, well, within the as-is state, what are the blockers to growth? And can we seriously consider removing those blockers, even if it means we have to spend 6 months with our legal team rewriting the requirements for this program?
Yeah. Yeah, super. This is extremely important because now I really like I think you're spot on from our community of practice because live training doesn't scale, but it's extremely important because those motions are. This is a lab, and this takes me back to the days when I was working as a university professor in a lab classroom teaching database design. And I could walk around the room or pull up a console and say, hey, Jane over here did something really cool. Let's take this as a teaching moment and share. And that's the kind of experience this gives, is that, okay, now I've got labs, now I've got instructor, I've got people that can help me because I'm gonna screw up and I really want that one-on-one attention. But like you said, it doesn't scale to have a team. You're always going to be hiring another trainer. Trainers want to train. That's why we work with partners to be able to put that out in that space, enable them really well, and they may be better than us in the first place. Like where I came from at Service Rocket, we had active solution architect practitioners that were in platforms every day, but they could also train. And then they shifted gears, but they had that context with the client. I could say, oh, well, hey, you have a question and that's relevant to my instance with this client. And that helped us better than us who might have been just doing the training, but we didn't have that connectivity with that specific client because the vendor already does or the partner already does. It's really cool stuff.
Shannon, I know we have a few more slides, but I'm
Yeah,
seeing that we only have 7 minutes left. Do you want to take over? And if you have any
yeah.
questions or if there's anything else in the chat you want to cover?
Good question. I think there were a number of questions that came through that I think are interesting. If we want to
Yeah.
kind of rapid
Let's
fire.
jump on a couple of those.
I can start with the one that's connected to this topic we've been discussing from Alex about the partners. So at Atlassian, we have a partner structure that's nested. So, we have channel partners, sales partners, some of whom are also solution partners who are authorized by us to do implementations. And then a subset of those solution partners were defined as the authorized training partner cohort. So in theory, these are all solution partners are eligible to become authorized training partners so long as they can meet certain criteria. And I believe that when that program was first built, the theory was, well, of course, it's a natural fit to have the team doing the implementation also able to provide training. I think something that's been a challenge for that program historically is that not all solution partners are good at training, even if they want to do it. And then not everyone who's good at training is a solution partner. So figuring out how to identify the solution partners who are actually going to be great trainers and who are going to be able to run a successful training business, because we really care about the business health of these partner businesses. And then more recently, expanding the aperture, expanding the definition of who gets to be an authorized training partner to include organizations that are not solution partners. In the past 18 months, we had some very, very large global consultancies, you can probably guess who they might be, join our solution partner program. And these are, organizations that have thousands of trainers on their staffs already. And so they came to us and said, great, you have an authorized training partner program. We're a solution partner. We want to become an authorized training partner. But our program was not built to meet the needs of a global organization with thousands of trainers. So we very quickly realized that the perfect partner, the people who would actually help us grow delivery at scale globally, wanted nothing to do with the program as it was built at the time. So we've been thinking about how we rebuild it, not just to meet the needs of these partners who are in front of us immediately, but the next 5-6 years of trying to identify the next and the next cohort of these partners who are going to help us scale. And we go back and forth internally a lot about how we think about and describe the value of live training delivery versus on-demand content, which naturally has such a larger reach and potential scale. And so we're trying to focus on how we integrate these different components of the customer education function. So we really are looking at ways to make on-demand training, live training, certifications, and then the other experiences that happen in the community feel like one holistic and integrated journey that we're taking customers on. We're not just selling you a single discrete training.
Yeah. I want to take one more question, and then we probably want to do this real quick and wrap up. Alex actually talked about pushback on free training. This is a question, I'll read it. I also get pushback on free training because cost per user and concerns over competitors seeing our product capability. How did you overcome those hurdles? I want to ask you that, but
we offer free instances of our product to anyone who wants to sign up less than 10 users. So we're not worried about sharing capability functionality. We're an open company by default, so most of that information is available already.
I'd also add something. I want to add something into that. Actually, that's really important. This is more holistically, not necessarily Atlassian related, but that competitors seeing product capability. If that's coming from an executive or a leader, and someone's scared about, well, I'm teaching you how to use our platform, and then you could steal that as a competitor. It's out of the bag anyway. Anybody can look at that regardless. Pandora's box is open.
Yeah.
So it's more important, I think. This is, to me, Marshall, I'm not going to repeat it for you, but I would rather open up and teach everybody as much detail as I can. That's what makes it sticky, because if our product, if you know how to use our product, you're going to stay with it. A competitor, be damned.
Yeah. Yeah. Alex has a great question here also about how much training is tailored or customized versus how much of it is standardized. It's a great question, because I think the answer depends on how you define customization. So if we open it up all the way, then I'd say that the modularization of our on-demand catalog has allowed users to customize their own experience by only consuming lessons A, F, and G instead of consuming the entire course to find that material. We find that when we observe the behavior of our learners on our platform, we see that frequently. Lessons being skipped, people jumping back and forth between courses, sometimes even on unrelated topics or different products. How much of the training is actually customized to meet the needs of a specific user is still a relatively small percentage, significantly less than 10%. But we're in the middle of building out some new technology, as well as standing up some new programs that are specifically designed to meet the needs of enterprise customers that I think will radically rebalance this, just because of the number of end users inside of these accounts. So it could be that within another 12 to 18 months, something like 30% of the learning experiences, the individually unique engagements, are being actually customized.
Cool. All right. I think we're about out of time here. We could go. I'll put the slide back up and what's next for us. Shannon, you probably have to do some administrative stuff. So you want to wrap us up?
I mean, I just wanted to thank you both for coming and sharing. I think what you're doing is amazing. And earlier we heard from Chris and Lindsay at SaaS Academy Advisors, and they talk a lot about transformational education, really focusing on the customer, the user, and how do we help them to learn and grow and meet them where they're at. And I think you all are doing that really well. So thank you for coming and sharing, pulling back the curtain a little bit to share what you have going on. I've been telling people, save the date. September 18th, we're going to have a whole day talking about how
Cool.
companies are using education to drive business impact. And so we'll just continue this conversation. But Dave, Marshall, thank you so much for coming
Thanks
and
so
sharing.
much.
For everybody who tuned in to this and the whole event today, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure. And we will see you again soon.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks, Shannon.
Bye.
Bye.